Hi, and welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Matthew Sheldon. Matthew is a managing director at Alvarez Marsal, where he focuses on growth strategy and performance improvement, particularly in the life sciences and medical technology arenas. Over the past 30 years, he has advised companies across industries on accelerating growth and navigating complex transformation. Matthew began his career at Monitor Group, founded by Harvard Business School professor Michael Porter, and later joined boutique advisory firm Axia Limited, where he helped lead growth, innovation, and private equity turnarounds. After Axia was acquired by Accenture Strategy, he helped build the CEO and enterprise strategy practice before joining Alvarez and Marsal to continue his work in growth and applied AI. Please welcome Matthew to Still Evolving. Matthew, welcome to Still Evolving. Incredibly grateful to have you on the show today, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited. I'm an emerging fan of yours, based on
Awesome.
listening to some of your past episodes. So thanks.
Appreciate
Thanks.
you. Thank you. We love starting off just really getting to know our guest. And so if you can just share a little bit on your journey, perhaps where you've been, all the way up through what you're working on now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the focus of my career, really from the beginning until now, has been as a growth advisor. So I've been a consultant to large and small organizations, and really cross industry, everything from Heineken beer to small biotechs here in the Boston area. And really that's been my more recent focus is life sciences and med tech. It's an industry I have a lot of passion for. The other, I would say, centerpiece to that is really focusing on customer insights and the human aspects of product design and development. And obviously in healthcare and life sciences, that's a big topic. But, I didn't study the sciences. I studied economics. When I started my career at a Cambridge, Mass strategy consulting firm, Harvard Business School professors, Michael Porter, who's a big name, Five Forces, background, kind of a luminary, and worked there for quite a while, but then moved on to a small boutique firm called Axia. Just a fantastic team. From there, really, we grew that firm and became part of an acquisition. So I worked for one of the largest organizations in that space, Accenture, a big behemoth of a technology firm. And, based on the relationships I made, sort of at that boutique firm, we've now moved on. I'm at Alvarez and Marsal, helping to grow the life sciences practice there. And I'm doing that with colleagues I've worked with throughout my career.
Super exciting. I would imagine along the way, life was not without its punches. So I'm just curious, as a leader now in this consultancy space, how have you helped perhaps your team navigate adversity or challenge, or perhaps individually, personally? What do you do? What have you learned that really helps us kind of not just survive when the adversity strikes, but really grow and seize the opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an industry where there's a lot of ups and downs. And certainly being part of a smaller firm, we were always fighting the good fight against bigger competitors with a lot more resources. And, with that, for every big project that you win, there's a couple that you don't, right? And that can be frustrating. And so I would say the challenge really is, and I kind of emphasize this, is always stay focused on first principles, stay pragmatic. And particularly in this, in this era, the pace of change is just incredible. And, whether that's tariffs and trade economics, obviously AI, right? That's a big part of the conversation. And navigating all of that complexity is tough. And at the same time, our access to information and analytics is a big focus of, what I've done, in terms of the teams that I've worked with and the clients that I've served. Our ability to know information has accelerated, as well. And so what I found is there's just increasing value in being able to cut through all that complexity. And that starts with just maintaining focus on first principles, being pragmatic, taking small steps. This was one of the big challenges we had, and it was a big adversity of ours at, the boutique consulting firm, is that we would engage clients, we would find interesting questions. Those questions ballooned into things that were much bigger than we could eventually solve, right? We would joke that we've sold more projects for the big blue chip consulting firms than we won, and that was true. And one of the ways that we worked around that and fought that sort of adversity is let's focus on smaller steps. Let's focus on working with clients and take that small first pragmatic step, then take the next step and then the next step. And, that was a way in which we were able to, as a smaller growing firm, be able to serve those clients one step at a time. And I found that even when we had all the resources of a big Fortune 500 firm, that logic still held true.
Mm,
And we often get hired to deal with problems that our clients find, too complex. There's no chat GPT answer. There's no playbook out there. That's why you get hired.
yeah.
And the complexity of trying to absorb and take in those complex problems all at once is tough. And that's the typical adversity we face is we try to think about too many things at the same time. Being able to break complex problems down, stay pragmatic, first principles, one step at a time, and eventually you get to the end. And
Yeah.
that's a philosophy that I force myself to go back to that all the time because it is easy today, more probably than ever, to get lost in all of that complexity.
Absolutely. Two things popped to mind. One, I remember I was a doctoral student and, eager. I was out there ready to work, roll up my sleeves, and my dissertation chair just sat me down. And I was in my earliest part of my career was in crisis intervention, disaster psychology. And he sat me down. He was like, "We aren't trying to save the world. We're trying to pass a dissertation defense. That's it.
That's right.
That is the goal." Right. And so I think for many of us who are drawn to kind of see big picture or drawn to kind of look at nuance and the on the down unintended consequences, like we can get kind of sucked into the complex. And so a healthy reminder to draw us back to the kind of a single problem set or what's the simple pragmatic challenge ahead of us. And then once we've kind of stepped and solve that, then we can kind of roll on to the next one. After all, that's the other piece I remind people is any large challenge, say a 4-year degree, it's broken down. It's like, what am I taking this semester? What are these 4 or 5 courses I need to focus on this semester? Because if I get too far ahead and I start worrying about the 400 level class that I take my senior year, it just kind of diverts our attention,
Absolutely.
amps our anxiety, and it's
And worry
easy to
about
feel
yeah, and
overwhelmed.
worry about what job you're going to have, and,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, slow the roll.
yeah, absolutely,
Slow the roll.
and and
Absolutely.
and that is, I think that is one of the first skills I think you learn in these big, hairy, unstructured problems is stop, breathe, think about what has to happen first. What's the first domino that has to fall, right? What's the
Yeah.
second? And over time you build those softer skills, those qualitative skills, right? Okay, along the way, I need to be building consensus and I need to get buy-in and I need to find the win-win for our clients so that they're, on our
Yeah.
side and they're pushing for
The
action.
how and the what, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
those are the
Yeah.
things you layer in as you heal those wounds and from all of those little bumps and bruises you get along the way, and you get better and better. But I think the first big challenge is really stop trying to think about it all at once, break it down, and then just one step at a time.
So you mentioned the kind of the bruises or wounds. What has helped you as a leader going through your career? What lends you the support or the refueling, recharging people? Are there aspects of your routine? What have you used or learned that you need to be able to weather the storm?
Yeah, I think there are two things that I try to do to both find gratification in the work, as well as just to keep kind of self-esteem and mood on track. One strategy is what I would define as small acts of creation. And so you have a tough week, you have another tough week, right? Find ways to recapture that intellectual momentum, that inertia, and find and design some small wins. And again, it doesn't have to be elements of your professional life. So a hobby that I have is I'm a maker. I like to behind me are 3D printers and I like to design and make little things, little useful tools. And so these small acts of creation can be, I made some shelf brackets last week and do little things that are tactile, create something useful. Those tough weeks where you got this big, difficult challenge and you haven't necessarily made progress, find something that you can make progress on. And again, it can be professional, it can be other things. Another is that I think helps me stay grounded to the work. And even when the going is tough, getting, one of the biggest challenges I think for leaders today is getting scale for yourself. So one of the things that I learned early on is one, I need to create space for my team to do a lot of the work, but where some leaders, and this is a bit of a caricature sometimes in the consulting industry, is that leaders often become divorced and distant from the work. And I take steps to try to avoid that. I like to work side by side with a team. And that's a trap if you're, not careful about how much you do that. But as long as you're building capabilities along the way, and even in a tough week, as long as, you help somebody learn a skill, right? You built some leverage for yourself. Made it so that the next time we go through a tough situation like this, I have a more experienced team uh, to help me get through that and to help us get through that. Those are small wins as well. So those are kind of the two things that I like to build in to the way I manage my life, manage my projects, manage my teams. Is try to teach somebody a skill at least once a week, and then these little small acts of creation, something that are small accomplishments during tough times that can give you that fuel, that accomplishment to continue.
I love it. Just the power that can come also from the giving, right? Like you're creating, kind of giving back and fueling, perhaps in your personal world, but also just the teaching. And I heard you say when you get through that, you've added capability, right? With a team. Certainly others could feel empowered and they're growing as well on your team. So really appreciate those. When I'm curious, kind of the creation helps kind of fuel you, but this is one heck of a marathon we're running, right? Like physically, do you have a favorite recovery practice besides the creation that you have taken on along the way?
So I consider myself, I think probably a lot of your listeners are as well. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a huge consumer of podcasts and YouTube videos, and so I try to build in, even during my day, little side moments where again I will watch movie reviews, I will just absorb information again, which helps get my mind away from the mundane administrative
Yeah.
tasks of work, and try to build in those moments throughout the day. And a lot of it is, kind of more intellectual pursuits. It could be a video on history, the latest technology unrelated to what I may be working on. And so I'm just a big consumer of kind of information, and I like to build in moments, throughout the day and throughout the week where I'm sort of taking a mental break and then, using that time away to then come back fresh
Yeah.
to those little challenges. And I find that again, I sort of joke that in this industry that I'm in, we're all a little bit professionally ADD, right? Our mind wants to touch and do a lot of things. And I feel like leaning into that a little bit is okay. It allows you to sort of clean the slate and get back to kind of what's important.
I love it. I'm just to nerd out for a second. I'm reminded. So, we talk a lot about the power of recovery, and obviously, sleep being the number one performance enhancer. And then you'll hear many others talk about breath work, mindfulness, meditation, that type of piece. But I also don't want to lose sight of the active recovery, like the micro recovery that
Mhm.
you're referencing, right? And joke about professional AD. I find, first off, like humans' attention, we aren't locked in. Like to sit down, and if you remember back when we had courses, you have to sit down or all day seminars, you're drained, you're exhausted, right? Trying to hang in there for hours on end. Same with our workload. Like we might be working independently on a project, researching, running numbers, etc. But those micro breaks are so critical. And for you to hear, tapping your natural curiosity, interest in learning, it could be a whole host of things, work related or not. There's some research that was looking at the power of micro breaks. So, even literally as brief of a moment as 2 minutes, being able to close our eyes and turn away. They also looked at a separate who was just looking at silly videos, right?
Mhm.
Like on pick your scroll, right? Ideally, it's not the doom scroll. I will say that, not the doom scroll,
The
which
algorithm can be
it
punishment, if
it
you will.
is quite present, but it could be just comical, something you find humorous videos, could be tapping, you mentioned the history video, right? But as little as 2 minutes. They also came back with a subjective report of increase of energy, the brain fog a little bit remitted, and ability to kind of think creatively and re-engage in their workflow. Yes, sleep's important. Yes, if you can get your 20 minutes of breath work, meditation, even if you're dividing that up. And let's not forget that it can just be 2 minutes in between your meetings. Just turn off the tablet, turn off the iPad, close your eyes, turn away from the screens, and it can be really, really helpful for
Yeah,
for your
absolutely.
performance.
And I'm in all things multidisciplinary. Sleep and managing that, this is my Aura Ring. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's one of these rings. It tracks sleep. It's again, I'm a geek, consumer of all information, including
There
about
you go.
everything about me, and so that is, sleep and certainly mindfulness. I go in phases like a lot of people, and it being, as we're recording this, January, getting back into yoga and things like that. I've done that before,
Yeah.
and this is a time of year when I usually start to get back in that flow. And January is what familiar with New England weather, that is probably the toughest month of the year in terms of
Mhm.
maintaining energy, maintaining outlooks. All the energy that comes with being a new year, it's not easy to get outside. One of the other tricks in warmer weather that I also do is I take afternoon calls from the dog park. I have a a
Yeah.
dog, and I just conditioned my team that, hey, look, that is one of those things where, and I wouldn't do that with clients, but it's amazing the stress relief that comes from watching dogs frolic and play
Yeah.
as you're, checking off the list at the end of the day with your team around, okay, did we do this? Get this done, get this done. And I think building a culture with your team that, like, that's okay. Like, take these little breaks. We're so much more effective when we're mentally there.
Mhm.
And also when we have, leaders that value the human elements of the type of work that we have to do and what it takes to stay at high performing levels. So I try to do that by either by example, but these are just little things that I do. They may not work
Yeah.
for everyone, but for me, it's amazing. The littlest thing of just being outside and watching dogs run around and play and have fun is something that just grounds you. So
For each of us, you mentioned for leaders who understand or appreciate support, the human element in this. And my comeback to that is unless you're dealing with robots all day to optimize performance, if your team consists of humans, in order to optimize human performance, we have to take a look at that holistic picture. And you talk so poignantly about the power of connection, the power that comes with these doses to your motivation and to be able to sustain even the grind, I guess, when it's not maybe incredibly rewarding on the spot, being able to create and being able to learn and taking those micro breaks to do so is so critical. But you mentioned, I wanted to kind of wrap up, you mentioned kind of where you are. And when it comes to energy, understanding the environmental demands on us.
mhm.
And you mentioned kind of probably the lack of daylight, the impact, right, of the
Yeah.
seasons,
Yeah.
not to mention the weather, perhaps. I think you guys may be getting blasted here in a minute. But yeah, all of those impacting the human system, right? And we can look at whether it's supplementation, such as vitamin D. We can look at how we're fueling. We've already mentioned recovery and for the physical foundations. But truly, it takes, if we're looking to show up in our moments that matter and optimize and sustain that high performance, it takes that holistic approach.
Absolutely.
So when we leave our audience that kind of immediate actionable takeaway, you've given us a number of them already. And certainly if you want to double down and expand, more than welcome. But I just want to kind of give you that time, that space to share back. If there's one more tool, takeaway, piece in your daily or weekly routine that you find that really helps you show up in your moments that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I touched on many of them. I think one of the other things that I learned from one of my mentors, the founder of Axia, the boutique firm that I worked at, he was very good about encouraging his team to, like, really understand your strengths, be comfortable with what you're good at, and also be comfortable with what you don't love or what you're not great at, or what you would rather have the team support you with,
Yeah.
and to find and be deliberately sort of complimentary in terms of the people that you work with. And I don't love admin. That's not for me. There are people who that is their sort of their way of bringing value to the work. And so for me, finding people that are complementary, we are often far too biased to people who think just like us and behave like us. Finding value in the intellectual diversity, the skill diversity, recognizing that you don't have to do it all and that others on your team don't have to do it all. We don't have to be 5 out of 5 across the board. There are people who are, and that's great. Try to be great at the few things that you're going to be responsible for and let others shine in the areas where you're not. And I think that is sort of the hallmark of great teams. Everybody has a role to play. You give people consistent wins, things that they are better at than anyone else on the team. And that just makes for a really productive, highly effective, and I think rewarding environment, for the team. And yeah, those are the kinds of
Love
teams
it.
I like to build in.
Just a healthy reminder, none of us are superhuman, right? And
Absolutely.
so
Give yourself grace.
having that awareness, to your point, of like where you have passion and skill in bringing value and honoring and complimenting the team, building the team, strengthening, nurturing the team. Great feedback. So thank you so much. Matthew, it's been a pleasure having you on. Grateful for the conversation today.
Excellent. Thank you. Great to talk to you.